Hi, so my name is Esperanza Torrijos, and this is my experiential project for Psychology 4020. And before I start, I want to talk about who I interviewed and a few takeaways I took from each person. This project consisted of me interviewing 3 people, and those 3 people, first one was my stepdad, which was loss of spouse, and then my dad, which was loss of a parent, and then my aunt, which was loss of a child. My stepdad lost his spouse, and my dad lost his mom a few years ago. And the last person I interviewed was my aunt, who had a miscarriage, which was a loss of a child. And it was really interesting interviewing each and every single one of these people. After I interviewed all of these people, I learned a lot more about them, and I even noticed a few themes emerge from their stories. So, the first theme that I realized was how the death really changed a person's perspective of life and the idea that life is short. So, after evaluating everything and looking over my notes, I realized that after this person had passed, they started to view life differently. If the passing would not have happened, so many different stuff would have happened in their life. They learned a lot about themselves after the tragedy happened, actually. They realized that life is short and that it can go away very quickly. And as humans, sometimes we don't think that, oh, life is short, or we have so much time on our hands, but we really do not know when our last day is going to be. And so when something tragic happens, like a death, it shocks us and it makes us take a step back and realize that we are really not permanent on this earth. So they definitely took a very different outlook towards life in general and how they view life and how life is very short, which is a very interesting perspective to have on life, and not everybody can have that. The second theme I noticed was that they all had this similar view of telling people close to them that they love them because of the tragedy that happened. This sort of falls back to the first thing that I was talking about. And we need to realize that we are not here to live forever. That one day it's going to be your last day. And it can be sad, to know that. But it is also important to know and let others know around you that you love them. And that we're alive right now. We should build those relationships. I keep mentioning, the 3 people I interviewed, they did not know that day was probably going to be their last from their loved ones. And so they really want to tell everybody, love everyone around you and spread that love around and build those friendships and relationships around you. And the last theme I saw that emerged was that it's okay to feel lost and also accept those emotions. Emotions are okay. Everybody has different experiences with death, some more than others. And, grieving processes are all differently for everybody, as we learned in the textbook. And if you feel like crying, it's okay to let that emotion out. It's okay to let those emotions flow. There's some people who like to process it alone, have some alone time, step back and realize what has happened, and others prefer to do it with family and with friends around so they don't feel alone all the time. And these are the big 3 themes that I saw from the people I interviewed. So next, I'm going to be talking about the key takeaways that I learned from each person. So one of the first persons I interviewed was my stepdad, and this was the loss of a spouse. So the first takeaway I realized was was that after the tragedy happened, after he lost his wife to cancer, he felt really lost and confused. And immediately his mind went to his children. Like, how was he going to be able to raise 3 children of his own? How was he going to take care of himself? He relied a lot on, his wife, and now he realized that he would have to do it all by himself and not his partner by his side. And then he also felt a little bit bitter to love. He was telling me that he felt that he would never find somebody else again. And now he had to take up the responsibility of being both a mom and a dad, He had to, work with his children, also have a work life, and then take care of the house. It was a big responsibility. And those are the big 3, this is the big 3 takeaways that I realized from when I interviewed my stepdad. And then I interviewed my dad. So his was a loss of a parent. So my dad lost his mom a few years ago, and something I took away from this was that love is unconditional. His mom was all the way in Mexico and he was here in Texas, but that did not mean that he loved her any less or that he's gonna miss her any less. No, he loved her the same as he did when he was in Mexico as well. There's no limits to love. And of course he mourned her death right when she passed away, and it was very sad for him because he couldn't attend her funeral, which he wished he would have, or that he could, but he couldn't. He really did try his best because she had some health complications, but at the end there was really nothing else the doctors could do about it. But my dad always showed his appreciation towards her and everything that she's done for him ever since he was a child. Now I'm going to be talking about when my aunt lost her child and a few takeaways I took from her story. So once this happened, she had been trying for a baby for so long, and then finally when she is pregnant, she has a miscarriage. So she was very mad at herself at the beginning, and also in general just mad at life. She didn't understand why things would happen like that, and she thought that it was her own fault, that maybe she did something wrong to her own body. She then later realized that things happen for a reason, and things worked themselves out later. And of course she was sad about it. She was very depressed for a few years, but she really relied on family support and friend support. And I remember her coming toward me and just us becoming very close because she was going through a very hard time. So of course after I interviewed everybody else, I also noticed a few things that were different. Not everybody's was the same. People grieved death differently and they had different reactions to it, and of course not everyone's going to be the same. So these are the contrasts that I found. So the first one was from my stepdad. So after his spouse passed away, he really mourned by himself, and he really kept to himself, and you could tell that he kind of isolated himself for a bit because he didn't really know what to do. He didn't know how to react. And instead of getting closer to his family, he kind of pushed everybody away. It really affected him negatively. And this was different because my dad and aunt both heavily relied on family support and being together with the family. And they didn't like being by themselves. They enjoyed being around their family. They would get happy. And, the support that we would give each other really helped them out. And of course, when they were telling me about this, I also realized that all of their funerals were different. From my stepdad's perspective of his wife, her funeral was more quiet, very toned down, overall like a very mournful experience. And then from my dad's, you know, his mom's funeral was a more positive tone. You know, they celebrated her life when she was alive. They remembered like the times they had with her, and you know, when she realized that she did have those health complications, she told everybody that she doesn't want nobody to cry at her funeral, you know, to rather celebrate the life that she had and the things she accomplished. My aunt, she had more of a prayer service for her baby, and that was also a very mournful, negative, toned down experience compared to the other two. So yeah, I noticed all of these different things that they had. And it was very interesting to know that, you know, there's ways that people grieve differently, and there's also ways that people have funerals different, and yeah, they're all okay. There's nothing wrong with having differences, of course. And then I want to move on to some key aspects I learned from everybody. So for my stepdad, I really gained a new perspective from him that I have not heard before. It was very interesting to like sit down and hear his story and realize how strong and brave a person he is to, you know, be doing better now, and like how he said that he would never find somebody, and then later on he found my mom. He realized that, you know, life is beautiful, and yes, there's some very like bad parts, but there's also some good parts in it. With my dad, I realized that death really affected him a lot growing up, and I realized that also played a part in like his relationship with his children. So now that I'm older, I realize that that's why he was a little bit distant when we were growing up. The death really affected him a lot, and he kind of pushed everybody away, and then realized that's not okay, so he started to get a little bit more closer to us. And then for my aunt, something I learned from her was that, you know, things happen for a reason, and sometimes we don't know why. And there are times when we want to complain, be like, why does this happen to me and stuff, and why doesn't nothing good happen to me? But we don't realize that those experiences that happen to us, they make us learn something else in the future, and they prepare us for other stuff that's gonna happen as well. So some of my takeaways was that I learned so much more about family members that I have never heard about before. It was very interesting being vulnerable, because I feel like this topic about death can be very taboo, and sometimes we don't even like to use the word death. And interviewing these people, I realized that we talked about it a lot, and I'm not that afraid to say that word anymore. You know, and I was able to put myself in their shoes and view how they view their death differently. You know, just losing somebody can mentally drain somebody, but also learning how they got up from that, how they moved on, how they were able to get better is really inspiring to me. And, you know, I learned to accept that death cannot be stopped. It's a very sad truth, but as human beings, it's part of life. And so how did my perspective change? So like I said, it's always been a tough subject to talk about for me. And, you know, being in this class and doing this project, I was a little bit nervous, you know, not gonna lie, at first, doing this project, because I was never really open about this. And so when I did interview, you know, 3 people I interviewed, it made me talk about it more and, you know, accept the fact that it's gonna happen to everybody. And also I learned so much that how not to feel alone if, you know, through the grieving process, and how to reach out for help and support from family and friends. And, you know, I was able to learn how they coped with it and how they got better, and that really gave me hope if I ever do experience that myself, which I will one day, because we're humans. So overall, this was a very interesting project to do, and it was just very eye-opening for me personally. Thank you for coming to my presentation, and I hope you learned a little bit more about these experiences with death. Thank you.